Hey everybody, so this is the newest Poseidon X Ambition gravel bike, and it's been updated with enough minor changes that Poseidon is calling it the Gen 2 version. But the best part is that the price has remained the same as the previous generation at a mere $750 US in early 2025 for the complete bike. In this video, an overview of the new budget gravel offering from Poseidon, including what's different, what's the same, and my thoughts on the bike as a whole. So for starters, the X Ambition was originally an update to the X, which was Poseidon's sort of all-road light gravel offering. It was very different from the beefier, more off-road oriented Redwood, which still remains in the lineup. The X Ambition was a revision to the X that leaned more toward gravel and less toward road, with the slacker geometry and wider tires. Now, in my personal opinion, the X Ambition is probably the most versatile bike in the lineup, and it's my personal preference over the Redwood and even the Triton for the type of riding that I mostly do. The build is lighter duty than the Redwood, making it easier on the climbs, but it's still pretty capable off-road and also decently quick on tarmac. In this latest revision, the X Ambition Gen 2, the geometry remains unchanged, which I think is great. I think it's a really well-balanced frame design overall. Now, if you want my take on the ride experience of the X Ambition, my earlier video is linked down in the description. This Gen 2 version rides pretty much the same as far as the handling goes. The biggest change is that the shifters have been updated to the Microshift Sword shifters, which is a huge improvement over the older model Advent X drop bar shifters. To save on costs, however, the rear derailleur is still the Advent X rear derailleur, which in my opinion always worked pretty well, and I never really had any issues with it. If you want, however, you can upgrade the rear mech to the matching Sword derailleur, since all of the Microshift 10-speed stuff is cross-compatible. The updated Sword shifters have, in my opinion, vastly improved ergonomics with a relocated pivot point for better braking leverage from the hoods. They also feature a more standard cable routing design, which eliminates that external shift cable and makes the cable runs a lot cleaner. Now, if you're curious about the gearing, it is the same as the previous generation. You get a 38-tooth single chainring crankset and a 10-speed 11 to 48-tooth cassette, which gives you a nice and low climbing gear and a decently fast top end. Another significant update in the Gen 2 model is that it now comes with compressionless brake housing from the factory, which, if you follow our channel at all, you know that I'm a huge proponent of this stuff for any mechanical disc brake systems. Now, I've got a video on the installation process and the benefit of compressionless housing that I'll also link down in the description, but in short, the combination of the Sword levers, compressionless housing, and the Tektro MD-C550 brake calipers, which are the same as on the Redwood, in my opinion make for a really strong braking setup. Definitely much better than the previous Advent X levers paired with standard brake housing. And then the last significant change to the Gen 2 model is that you now get a paint-matched carbon fork, whereas in the previous generation, all of the forks were sort of a raw carbon. Now, I think the paint-matched fork is a relatively small detail that obviously doesn't change how the bike rides, but it does change the aesthetic of the bike pretty drastically. And to me, it makes the bike feel a lot more refined, and I'll just say finished. So that's the Gen 2 X Ambition. In a nutshell, you get upgraded drifters, upgraded brake housing, and a color-matched fork. Now again, I really don't want to sound like a shill here. Recall that I've really got no skin in the game, and I'm not affiliated with Poseidon, but $750 for a bike of this spec is just objectively good value. Now you might be wondering about weight. Poseidon's website claims the size medium with no pedals is 24.7 pounds or 11.2 kilograms, and on my scale, this pretty much checks out. I measured 24.85 pounds or 11.27 kilograms, which isn't super light, but I also wouldn't consider it a tank either. It's one of the reasons that I personally prefer this bike over the Redwood, because the Redwood, while built tougher, does have a pretty significant weight penalty at nearly 28 pounds. And again, for $750, an off-road capable sub 25-pound bike is pretty remarkable. Now, as far as gripes about the bike, again, pretty tough to docket for anything given the price tag, but the obvious one is that in its stock form, it's got quick release hubs and 135mm rear hub spacing, which is definitely somewhat outdated by modern standards. Now, it won't affect the ride quality or handling, but if you ever do want to upgrade wheels, it's really hard to find a high quality disc brake compatible 135mm quick release wheel set. So upgradability might become a slight issue. However, Poseidon also has, as an add-on, a through-axle conversion kit for an additional $150. In this kit, you get a pair of swappable rear dropouts that will convert the rear end from 135 to your more standard 142mm hub spacing, which will allow you to run basically any modern wheel set. Now, at the front of the bike, since the dropout is kind of baked into the fork design, the through-axle conversion kit includes an entirely new carbon fork with the standard 12x 4x100 through axle wheel mounting system. And both the front and rear axle are included in this kit. Now again, this kit will set you back $150, but it totally modernizes the bike. Now the thing is, if you install this conversion kit, the stock wheels won't actually fit anymore. So you'd also need to upgrade the wheels as well, which is why Poseidon also offers a through axle conversion kit and wheel upgrade package for $450, which is basically the $150 kit plus a wheel set for an additional $300. Now the wheel set that you get in this kit is a very respectable 1,600 grams for the pair, which will definitely drop a decent amount of weight off of the stock build. It's an alloy wheel set with 28 spokes front and rear. It uses a center lock rotor mounting system. It's a tubeless compatible wheel set, and it's got a wider inner rim width at 23 millimeters, which is 4 millimeters wider than the stock rims, which means you can run wider tires without the sort of balloony tire profile that you get with the wide tire on a narrow rim. Now, one thing to consider here is that the stock wheels use a 6-bolt rotor mount, while the wheel upgrade uses a center lock mount. So you would need to get different brake rotors or get 6-bolt to center lock rotor adapters to run the new wheels with the stock rotors. It's not a huge deal, it's just something to note. So a starting price of $750 gets you a totally rideable, totally capable gravel bike. And then at a later time, if you want, you can drop an additional $150 to make it through axle compatible and invest in some modern upgraded wheels that will really liven up the bike. Now, zooming out for a second, if you look at we'll call it the landscape right now in the cycling industry, there's a ton of focus on what's new and coming. Latest technology, electronic shifting is big, e-bikes are definitely becoming a more dominant presence, and performance brands are perpetually fighting for your business. But to me, it's brands like Poseidon and Primos, State, Surly, and similar brands that are becoming fewer and further between. Now, these are brands that are arguably more down to earth, doing their best to maximize the value per dollar spent and offer well-equipped, well-thought-out bikes at a reasonable price point. Now, again, I'm not affiliated with Poseidon. Did I say that already? But I do appreciate what they're doing here, and I think a lot of you out there can relate. So anyways, my take on the new X Ambition is that it's a well-designed, decently spec'd bike with upgradability in mind, at a price point that's really hard to beat. Now, I didn't really talk about the ride experience here because it pretty much rides the same as the previous generation X Ambition, for which I already have a video, but of course the Gen 2 version has the upgraded shifters with much better braking performance right out of the box. Now, I can't come up with too many gripes given the price point. Something that I haven't mentioned is that it also uses a square taper bottom bracket and a fairly cheap crankset, but it works just fine. And again, with budget brands like Poseidon, the game is always to find a balance between performance and cost. And overall, I think Poseidon do a great job of cutting costs where it doesn't matter as much and prioritizing the things that do matter, like frame geometry and braking and shifting performance. If you have any questions about my experience with the new X Ambition Gen 2, just drop them down below and we'll do our best to get back to as many as we can. I think that's going to do it for this one. Thanks again for watching, and thanks for subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.